Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. If you can stay muted, unless, of course, you're going to ask a question, that's highly encouraged. It is the Ask Sean show, so we do want you to just pop in and treat it as conversational. Sean's going to have a few different technologies and I think case studies, so, let's make it a conversation. Um, I am Will with Green Projects Group, and this is the collaboration Ask Sean show with Electrify West Michigan. Green Projects Group is my company, and Electrify West Michigan is a container for the conversation about electrification. We are typically in person or IRL, in real life, as the kids call it these days. So these are some of the field trips that we've done. On the top left, you can see Dale's passive house that we're building here in Grand Rapids. I've been fortunate enough to join that several times over the last year. We did a climate cafe in a park once to talk about the many feelings that can be associated with climate change. We test drove Teslas, and the bottom right is, it doesn't do it justice. We're standing next to an enormous solar array. So we've even toured a power plant and test ridden e-bikes and those kinds of things. So Electrify West Michigan is a lot like the Ask Sean show. It's a non-monetized space to just learn about electrification. Um, for work, we do energy efficiency and electrification coaching. I know enough to be dangerous in all of these 12 categories from 12 o'clock around to 11, weatherization, panel upgrades, cooking, micro-mobility. I did accidentally start an e-bike company to help people get e-bikes, and I do have some in my garage if you live in Grand Rapids and you're interested. Transportation, we're talking about EVs, of course, water heating, heat pump water heaters, battery operated lawn tools, HVAC, we talk about heat pumps, clothes drying, solar, lighting, and indoor air quality. These tend to be the things that we circle back around to again and again for electrification coaching. And coincidentally, the Inflation Reduction Act of late 2022 provided us with the MyHERS program. Here in Michigan, we have $210 million, which is allocated by EGLE, our state Department of Energy. And an individual home can get up to $34,000. So Green Projects Group has become almost exclusively a MyHERS contractor. We do energy audits, and then we actually sub out the work to get projects in the ground. So it's honestly a dream come true for me, for an energy efficiency nerd who's sort of a chronic do-gooder. It's just like an amazing opportunity to just do energy audits and get electrification projects put in the ground. Um, and Sean's going to talk about this a lot more, but essentially, I just feel that it never hurts to do a bit of grounding at the beginning of a
Yeah.
webinar for why are we here? This is a chart from NASA. I'm sure you've all seen this or something similar. Highest CO2 in 800,000 years, and that's not great for the climate. And this is our number one space rock. We do not have a second space rock, so we got to take care of this one. And me personally, it's for love. I think these conversations can err towards the abstract a bit sometimes if we're not careful. And I have a family and children, and so I'm doing this for them and the world that they will inherit. Um, so that's it for Green Projects Group. I just want to say briefly a little bit about the Ask Sean show. Sean is a pioneer in this movement. He's been working at this since 2011. He's designed award-winning net zero energy homes, helped push forward legislation, and set a very high standard for what electrification can and should look like. He's a figurehead in the movement and honestly a North Star for those of us following from behind. I've only been at this for a couple years, so we all have a lot to learn from Sean, myself included. So take it away. Thanks, Sean.
Aw, that was so sweet. Okay, here we go. So, thank you so much, Will.
My pleasure.
Welcome, folks. This is, like I said, it's a Q&A. You're welcome to take yourself off microphone and ask the question anytime here. And this is going to go kind of quickly because I'm trying to get to questions of like me talking. So here you're going to see there's a booklet on the left called The Pocket Guide to All Electric Retrofits of Single Family Homes that we wrote like 5 or 7 years ago. And oh, this is April 2022. We started writing other books in 2018. There's a bunch of them online. If you want to do commercial buildings, apartment complexes, single family houses, new construction retrofits, they're all on our research publications tab at redwoodenergy.net. In the booklet, like I love that little wheel that you had, Will, of all the different things you guys talk about. This is in the booklet. Is the idea is it's like a pocket guide, like for birds or trees or plants or something. Um, yeah, thanks Wayne for sticking in the chat the link to the documents. So if this goes quickly, you can read it there. As mentioned, there's my big little bio. I started studying in 1995 at this demonstration house, which is the last one left over from the 1970s, Carter's era of demonstration homes for net zero living. So then cool little subdivision of homes. I've done like 500 something developments, but these are some cool ones here. I love these little candy cane Easter egg colors. Net positive senior housing in Fort Bragg, or this one that's on the East Coast on the Beltway, 9 stories tall, solar wall. And then, of course, there's solar all over the roofs, and it's affordable housing for Montgomery County. Story time, which I love. Okay, so heat pumps are like invented around 1854. It's an international collaborative, but essentially there's one guy in Australia that kind of claims credit, and they immediately get used to make ice to keep beer cold. True in Australia, true all over the world. The breweries, like this is Anheuser-Busch's ice maker back in 1882 on the left-hand side. Thank you, industry and commerce. You found a good use for ice. You see here women delivering it during World War One. Okay, after heat pumps, we get electricity because the first heat pumps were mechanical, fossil fuel driven, right? Here we have on the left-hand side, this is the Eiffel Tower built back in 1889 in San Francisco, the home of the world's first. They built a 1/4 size, the Monet Tower. There's a guy named Monet who built it, and it was all electric, not gas like you see on the left-hand side, and it was way more impressive. But unfortunately, it's not in Golden Gate Park anymore because only like 3 years later, some hater of a superintendent literally blew it up with dynamite because he didn't believe in statues and edifices. He wanted the place, he liked plants and trees. And I'm a naturalist, but I would not have blown up that awesome 27-story tall, electric lights moving all over kind of thing. It was quite a spot. Niagara Falls, this is the home of Triscuits, the electric biscuit, because Tesla, literally that guy, Tesla, built some of the first power plants on Niagara Falls' incoming rivers, hydroelectric plants, and that's also where we get shredded wheat. Both of those were made at electric bakeries right on, because that's where electricity was, right on Niagara Falls. So if you ever, it's like a party thing. What are electric biscuits? Triscuits. Now, by the 1920s, about 8 in 10 households in the cities had finally gotten electricity. 30, 40 years after it's being delivered into cities, most people have it. In the country in the 1920s, almost no one, like 5%. And instead, we have this massive microgrid movement. There's 1 million homes in the nation that are built with microgrids, meaning maybe a wind turbine, but definitely a gas turbine and a whole bunch of lead acid batteries. And then it comes with light bulbs. So microgrids and off-grid living and such are old, 100-year-old idea. Then the electric utilities banded together saying, we're going for this. This is a big business opportunity. We're going to hire Ronald Reagan out of retirement. He's the guy who found Marilyn Monroe. We trust him. He's the head of the actors union because he was like a big union guy at the time. And they built him a mansion. You see in the lower right-hand corner, all electric. And he started filming himself with his, like doing selfie videos, so to speak, showing people how to live all electrically. And it was huge. It was the #1 television show on Sunday nights in the 1950s. People would just get in front of it. He'd introduce James Dean doing this piece of theater with me. Big deal. The goal was to get every house to 100 amps in new construction. It was an explicit goal. They were trying to get nuclear power plants hooked up for clean energy. Still an opportunity for clean energy, although very expensive clean energy. Talk to the people in Georgia, just got Vogtle turned on. 25% increase in everyone's bills to turn on one chunk of a nuclear power plant. Okay, but they were going for it then. Gold medallion homes, advertisements to women, playing upon women's insecurities, playing to men's insecurities. Everyone's insecurities are being manipulated by the madmen of New York City to try to get 100 amps to be the code minimum in the National Electrical Code, which they succeeded in 1962. 100 amps is an important number. They'd studied it and said, we can do all electric homes within 100 amps. All electric heat pumps, stoves, everything, 100 amps is enough. And it always has been ever since. The electrification movement got slowed down big time by the OPEC oil embargo. So Israel was defending itself at the time in the Yom Kippur War, and OPEC, the Arab chunk of OPEC, banned export of gas to the United States. Electricity prices went up fourfold because so much of our electricity was from burning oil. Plenty of it's from hydro, other sources, but electricity prices went up fourfold. Reagan worked it out with Nixon to exempt California from a building code standard and worked with him to exempt them from fuel efficiency standards, which is why California to this day has the most advanced, so to speak, building energy codes and has been able to require electric vehicles in the portfolio, and then other states have been able to adopt it, all because of this deal between two Californian governors who both became president later. Nixon, pardon me, was not governor. He was vice president. He did not serve as governor. He was a Californian senator. And then, anyway, we had one other setback, which was in 2000. In California, there was an energy crisis. It was a scam. So a whole bunch of Texan gas companies pretended they couldn't deliver gas to the California electric utilities, and electricity prices went up eightfold. This delayed electrification in California, but it kept on moving forward in the rest of the country. It started in 1993 again, without anyone talking about it. It just started happening. It's kind of fun. In the 1970s, we get our first heat pump water heaters from a dairy company. This is the Dairy Equipment Corporation is taking cooling. They're setting up an air conditioner essentially to chill milk so it doesn't spoil when it comes out of the cows. And all that extra heat, they're sticking in an insulated tank and they're using it for wash down in the dairy barn, nice hot water. And they're like, what if we shrunk that? And by 1978, they had a tank of water that had a little heat pump on top. Ah, that's 1978. We get the model HP80 thermistor. Now this slide, this is important to me. This is my mother-in-law died in this fire, the Tubbs Fire of Santa Rosa, 2017. This is Nan. She was an environmental activist. She was like the treasurer for the local Save the River Association. She did garbage cleanups and such. Nice person, little dog, you know. And this is the first real climate change fire in California, which dozens of people died, and Nan was one of them. And from that intense grief, my wife, was very upset. How can you really explain, like a death in fire to someone? And so from that, I hired lawyers to try to figure out how to ban gas in new construction, which is what you see me proposing here in front of this crowd in Berkeley at our electrification exposition. You guys do them too, like little, show everyone how to get rid of their products, bring the heat pump folks in. And everyone's outraged because by 2019, Paradise is also burnt down with more than 80 people dead. It's a city, called Paradise, and almost the whole city, the school, city hall, everything burnt down. And so there were 80 cities across California that passed gas bans within the next couple of years. Other people died from landslides. Like 20 people died from a landslide that was after a fire. One of these climate change fires, and the whole hillside comes down and buries people alive in their homes. So Californians were upset. Yeah. Now, that's California's politics, but I want to re-emphasize that as a national movement, it's been led by the South, because development is 95% built by developers. Like new homes, that's done by wealthy people building the house for someone else to buy. 95%. So what you're seeing here is a natural expression of market interest. California being this weird place where we should be green, like the rest of the South, but we're not. Why the South, you might ask? It's because heat pumps have always worked in the South without having to incur much electric resistance heating because there's warm winters. And until the advent of computers in heat pumps in 2009 in the United States, in like real products that were available, we couldn't operate a heat pump in the wintertime. And so us up in Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota, these states, New York, Maine, they were running electric resistance most of the time in the winter if they didn't have a heat pump. If they had a heat pump, I mean to say. So you see it in the South, where it's like 33%, 77% all electric construction in Florida, 72% in Hawaii. Like any place you've gone vacation in those two states, you've almost certainly stayed in all electric residence without realizing. Including the Trump Towers. My dad voted for Reagan. I've tried to emphasize the fact that this is a business in converting homes to run on cheaper electricity, cheaper energy, and build it less expensively. And so our developer president has built multiple all-electric towers next to the beach where it's more expensive to deliver natural gas, usually through high water tables. It can be challenging to just get the gas there. And then it's cheaper to build. You don't have to put in a secondary set of infrastructure, gas piping through the whole building. You've already delivered electricity to every single appliance. All appliances run on electricity for starting them, fanning them, etc. And so you just have to add secondary infrastructure and maintain it and vent it and all the rest of it. This is a cheaper way to build, which is why that's what's going on in the South, where 4 in 10 homes in our country are built every year. On the electricity side, in the last few years, everything's changed because solar and then solar plus battery have become the least expensive way to deliver electricity. And this is true in Texas, it's true in California, it's true in Iowa, it's true in everywhere in the nation and in the world. So in 2024, combined, we had about 96% clean energy, and then there's 2% nuclear, which you could call clean, and I'll call it clean. 4% gas. That's the 96%. 2025, there's no nuclear coming on board. There's a little bit more natural gas. But what's changed is battery storage is growing. It's eating into into the solar. Batteries have kept the power on in California and Texas for 2 summers in a row. That's a huge deployment of batteries. And now we're not seeing brownouts or blackouts due to air conditioning loads because of just batteries. And it's massive. Heat pumps are also been growing fast. And I haven't gone into the chat. I've been talking a little bit fast. Is there any chat comments here, Shiping? Okay, no chat at the moment. This is heat pump sales. So 2019, right? We still have a situation where heat pumps are selling less than gas furnaces. And this is the same graph for the world. And just so you know, the United States is now the world's #1 purchaser of heat pumps. Okay, so then in 2020, it's neck and neck. 2020, it's neck and neck. 2022, that's when all of a sudden heat pumps sell more than furnaces in the United States. And the distance grows in 2023, and it grows much more in 2024. And you see the same thing down here with water heaters, gas and red, blue is electric. 2022 is the year that we see just a big change. And this is true in the world. This is a graph of the United States sales, but I could show you a global graph and it'd be the same graph. Now, getting into how to electrify your homes. I've tried to explain a little bit of the history of electrification, a little bit of like, hey, we have clean electricity now. Any of the old justifications why we shouldn't be electrifying, gone, blown away. Pah! We know that that's the big seller. We know it's cheaper to build. These things are all established fact. Now, this last thing that the anti-electrification forces put forward is like, well, you can't do it because you physically don't have enough power delivered to your house. 100 amps is not enough for an all-electric home, which obviously is the silliest thing you can think of, since this was the whole point of the all-electric move in the 60s. We can certainly do it today with way more efficient technology. So this is an example. We won an easy prize from the Department of Energy last year for electrifying 2 houses on 100 amps. A 1,400 square foot double wide manufactured home from the 1970s with no new insulation, nothing, just an old house. Plus its little garage, 600 square foot, insulated it well, turned it into a small home. They're having a baby, they live in the small little house they just built, the family comes and visits all the time, they're staying in the big double wide. So the garage here, these are the technologies I want you to be paying attention to. So we didn't put in a standard kitchen. We put countertop kitchen devices that can use like the toaster wire, like any old outlet in your kitchen. You can put a 2-burner induction burner on it, and you can also put ovens on it. And when Nan died, that's what we did in our house. I pulled that stupid gas stove out of my house as the last appliance I had. She'd actually helped us physically get it in, dented her van, which we still own to this day, getting her that stove into the van, yanked it out. And we put in countertop cooking devices. Never gone back. Works great. This is a wall-mounted cold climate heat pump. It's made by Afoca. This is an A.O. Smith. 120 volt plugs into any outlet. All these plug into any outlet. All your outlets, just your standard issue 120 volt outlets in the house. These are all appliances that do all the normal work, but plug into that kind of outlet. So you can just instantly electrify some gas appliance, but just plug in something else in. The water heater, this is a heat pump washer dryer, so it's all in one box. Really efficient, fast, gets you nice dry laundry. Rheem makes a 120 volt version just like A.O. Smith does. I think you should look at the A.O. Smith because in Michigan it gets colder in basements and etc. And this has a small 900-watt electric resistance backup element to the heat pump. So you always have heating going into your water heater, either electric resistance, but at a modest 900 watts, not 4,500 watts, not 5 times as much as you'd see in a more standard heat pump water heater. So the Rheem here, it doesn't even have a 900-watt electric element. It's just a 500-watt heat pump, but it's for like indoor or warm basements, that kind of thing. And they're nice. They dehumidify in the summertime, so you get a dry basement. Lots have been installed in Michigan, just so you know, the 120-volt version. Michigan basements have seen plenty of them for years now. They came out in 2020, 2021. Mr. Cool is a cold climate heat pump that works way down into the negative 20s Fahrenheit. And you can install it yourself. It has pre-charged refrigerant lines. So if you're handy and you got a couple of days, you can lug these things around and stick them on. And everything can be done with just standard tools and no extra certifications. Just it is a 240-volt device. And that's interesting because we put in a 240-volt stove in the manufactured house. This is the double wide here, their appliances. And then we did a circuit splitter. It's a transfer switch. So in this case, both the stove and the heating and cooling system can operate at the same time as long as the total demand is below 50 amps, which is really hard to get to 50 amps. And this heat pump for space heating doesn't have electric resistance. It's using a computer to drive it into colder temperatures effectively. Keep your house at 70 degrees when it's negative 20 outside. That's what Mr. Cool promises. There's little videos of them doing it in like North Dakota. So this NeoCharge here, it allows both of them to operate on the same circuit unless somehow you manage to crank that stove up so hot and you're blasting the heater, then you get to choose and your stove will go. You'll be cooking for that last 5 minutes for some reason when you're like just blasting the stove, all four burners and the oven. It's almost impossible to do. But if you did that, then it would turn off your heater for 10 minutes or whatever. Some little amount of time, you probably wouldn't notice. So that circuit splitter allows us to use a big 50 amp circuit for two jobs. And that's part of how we kept two houses on 100 amps, all electric. This is one of them. This is cute. This is a 120-volt plug it in anywhere stove, and it makes mist. This is my 6-year-old. Now she's 11. Here are versions of them that are more commercial. I used to put my Christmas tree around that one, put presents and things, like have a little fire in there. It's so cute. Back when they used to put candles on trees to make twinkling lights before electric lights came in and stopped all the house fires. So these are plug it into your existing stove spot, plug it into a 120-volt outlet, and you can get electric resistance heaters that are designed with them, so you also get blasted with heat, and it's not just a beautiful aesthetic, but it is absolutely convincingly a fire. And it's using an ultrasound to make a little tiny bit of mist. You can't even feel it. It doesn't get anything wet, but it's there, so you can see it. And there's little LEDs that light it up. It's beautiful. Here's your cold climate heat pumps so that you can go down to negatives and not have to put in electric resistance. This is the new computer-based technologies. And they also have usually an electric element in there to de-ice them because the ice builds up on the compressor coils. And that's really the only thing they ever needed to do is just put in de-icing. But then also the computer allows the pump and the fan to go really fast as it gets cold outside. So lots of them. Carrier, Daikin, Goodman. If you live in Michigan or someplace else that gets cold winters, here's Mitsubishi's version. This one, I just want to show how they have it. You can get it so it mounts on the wall, if that's what you'd like one remote controlled heater for each of the rooms. The old farmhouse that my mom's best friend has in Wisconsin, very old farmhouse. There's one of these in each room. It's lovely. You can air condition in the summertime to your preferred temperature, dehumidify with it, heat your room in the winter. But she closes down a lot of the house, so the upper stairs rooms don't need to be heated in the winter, and she's just mostly doing downstairs. It's a nice way to save energy if you want, is to do this kind of like a mini split that's called in each of the different rooms. But here's one for the air handler for your furnace ductwork. Here's ones you can put in the ceiling just to handle a couple of rooms. Yeah, multi-position air handlers, lots of them. Do you have any questions about this? This idea that you could, yeah, Will's like, drop any thoughts? This is the device's cold climate versions of heat pumps that avoid the boogeyman that the electric utilities have been putting out, or gas utilities more so, but also because a lot of the electric utilities are owned by gas burning companies, like they'll have gas power plants. So some tension out there. Basically, I've just seen a lot of presentations of people said like, oh no, heat pumps and electrification is going to crash the grid in the wintertime in Wisconsin or Chicago. And they're not studying that question with cold climate heat pumps. They're assuming electric resistance, which is not true and not fair. If you want to go ground source, that gets more efficient in the wintertime. It is more expensive. Ground source
Sean,
is usually paired with hydronic floors. Go ahead.
yeah, we
Yeah,
did have a
Will.
question in the chat if you
Yeah.
want to talk about heat pumps right now. Ginny says our home has a natural gas boiler with hot water baseboard heaters.
Yeah.
Current air source and ground source heat pumps cannot provide water that's hot enough. Okay, so perfect timing. You're just about to talk
Perfect
about
timing.
this.
Let's do this.
Yeah,
Okay.
and she's just asking for more info on that, or our other option for all electric heat would be mini splits, which get to be very expensive. They have no ductwork. Yeah, common situation in Michigan and
Let
Wisconsin.
me let me show you the solution. Let's start going backwards between the efficient heat distribution system. These are radiators, baseboard heaters, etc. Because you can see all the different ways in which they can hide them. All sorts of different radiators are shown on this picture. All the different kinds, basically, you can think of. And they're all designed to deliver heat to your house at 80 degrees Fahrenheit water, or 90, or 100, but that's how they are efficient with having lots of little tiny metal fins in there, as opposed to old-fashioned radiators, which is much thicker metal, or even sometimes the big radiators, which can barely distribute heat at all. And you have to put like 168-degree water, and then you burn yourself should you touch that radiator, at 160 degrees. That's a fast burn. So you'd start with potentially replacing your radiators or your baseboard heaters so that you could have low temperature water from a heat pump. And then I would go back and I'd show you'd say, okay, for ground source, these are all heat pumps that produce up to about 130, 140 degree water. All the ones on this is ground source do that. Air source like Arctic, Space Pack, AirMac, Chiltrex. These are all air to water heat pumps. And they pretty much top out at 140 Fahrenheit. And so that's why you go to new radiators. Yaga is one brand. There's lots of them. I'm just trying to illustrate this as a concept. You get heat delivery efficient radiators as opposed to a heat pump that is only one or two out there. I don't have it on this, but Gree makes an air to water heat pump that gets to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. It just came out this spring. I apologize, I didn't update my slide to show it. But I have it. Gree, Gree, Chinese manufacturer, like most heat pumps are. And pardon me, to drink a little water this morning, or for you, afternoon. Does that answer your question? This idea, like you could, as you say, you could put in mini splits, air source heat pumps, and just start a different kind of heat delivery system. But if you want to keep the water in your walls, the piping, then you could change out this heat pump, make 130-degree Fahrenheit water, and have it delivered to appropriate radiators. Okay?
John, does one of those stand out, or do they all kind of have their pros and cons? Not the radiators, but the
The heat pumps?
yeah.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so I have a friend in upstate New York who has been doing these air-to-water heat pumps on his apartment complexes. He likes to heat up a big tank of water and then deliver that around to the apartment for domestic hot water. But his air-to-water heat pumps, um, he's been testing different ones, and he's found that Arctic, which is made out of Canada, is the one that does the best in
Okay.
his coldest winters and delivering the heat that it promises. Now,
Awesome.
that research was 6 years ago, and I don't want to, cast shade on Space Pack or Chiltrex or things like that. They're always improving their products. But Arctic is designed in Canada for Canadians. So it's cold up there. And I think that its name, Arctic, they also do, I think, the best hot tub heaters. They have special ones. So if you want to have like a nice hot tub outside in the wintertime running on a heat pump, as opposed to electric resistance. A lot of people have electric resistance hot tubs, but if you want to do an efficient heat pump, then the Arctic they sell them just for that. It's very cool pictures of people in tubs with an Arctic next to it.
Cool. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. Stoves, electric resistance is about, okay, let's do the stove comparison. A gas stove is 30% efficient, an electric resistant stove is about 60%, and an induction stove is 80 to 90%, 75 to 90%. So these are induction stoves. The LG is kind of one of the best brands, if not the number one brand in the country right now for appliances. Everyone's great. I don't mean to, not casting shade. But you can get an LG stove that's really nice for $2,600, and you can get a Frigidaire for about $1,500. These prices change all the time. If there's tariffs on it or not on it or da 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 da, they can be as low as about $900 from Frigidaire. And you can get LGs in the like $1,900 range. I'm just trying to give you standard-ish prices so you don't get shocked. But if you're if you're looking around for sales and things like that, why would you do this? I want to emphasize how bad it is that you might have a gas stove now. And this is the best science I can provide. This is only about a month old when I've been working on this for a while. Two really good studies. The study on the left, methane and nitrous oxide emissions from natural gas stoves, cooktops, and ovens. Okay, see all the names behind it? This is real science done with real monitoring equipment. And they said 21.7 nanograms of NOx per joule. Joule is a unit of energy coming off the stove. Okay, so I was like, if I have a 7,000 BTU burner, which is a small gas burner on high though, like one you might see in an apartment standard issue stove, that's a 7,000 BTU burner. It might be 10,000 or 12,000, but the 7's the smallest one. So if you turn on your boiling water, you're producing 160 milligrams of NOx per hour. I got that converted because over here in this study of what happens if you have a Ford Focus idling, how much NOx comes off a Ford Focus? NOx, nitrous oxides, is the chemical that causes smog. It burns your lungs. It causes asthma. That's what causes asthma, is NOx. Specifically, that chemical burns your lungs. It's terrible stuff. So it turns out 4.5 cars idling per hour is the same amount as one gas stove burning on full for an hour. You could think, oh, so if I turn my gas stove down, that's only one Ford Focus idling into my kitchen? Yeah. Like if you turned it down to like 1,500 BTUs, like a tiny little flame, that's equivalent to one car idling into your kitchen of NOx. NOx is removed by cars because they have catalytic converters. So that doesn't mean that you're still getting a poisonous gas called carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide coming in, and that would suffocate you to death. But the NOx part of it, the part that gives you chest cancers of various types, lung issues, asthma, etc., the burning stuff, you get the same amount of caustic NOx coming off your gas stove as 4.5 Fords idling into your kitchen. And that is why it's just as bad to have a gas stove in your house as having a secondhand cigarette smoker just puffing away in the kitchen. That's what it is so much dangerous chemicals coming off of this flame. So if you're trying to figure out what are you going to do first, that's
Sean,
first.
can I pop
Please.
in here? One thing that you pointed out a while ago was that nitrogen dioxide, which is NO2, is heavier than air. Even even if it's
Yeah.
hot, it's still going to sink.
Yeah.
So, and that's the stuff that really gets your lungs. So the concentration of nitrogen dioxide is going to be higher near the floor where your kids and pets spend time. So that's another thing to be aware of.
Yeah. You think that you're getting polluted, but really the number one person getting polluted is the little ones in your home. Yeah. Thanks, Wayne. It's also true the number one source of formaldehyde in your house, which is an even heavier, longer chain. Formaldehyde is that chemical that rats are floated in for hundreds of years and they don't rot because it's the most poisonous chemical we can make, pretty much. Nothing can live in formaldehyde. That's the number one source of formaldehyde in your life, is the gas stove. And it's, as Wayne's saying, much heavier than air. So the alternatives, here's barbecues, 120 volt, plug it into anywhere, barbecues, bunch of fun. Here's a couple of my staff. You can see there's a whole bunch of burgers and hot dogs there. Just like in any normal barbecue, get it hot for about half an hour, with, the coals, so to speak. Then the elements are thoroughly hot and you can cook your burgers and things. Now, I've shown appliances, and I've tried to make the point that you can just plug them in. Let's say that you were getting high power versions though, as opposed to power efficient versions. Okay, a different solution set is they use a smart panel. The span on the left-hand side, that's a great one. You put 100 amps, you have a 100 amp panel, you put a 100 amp span panel in, and now you can support 400 amps of stuff getting plugged in. Lumen over here, it does like 30 and 50 amps that you plug into, or it plugs into a 30 to 50 amp amount of electricity from your panel, but it balances maybe 150 to 200 amps of stuff that you plugged into it. In the same way that I showed you that little circuit splitter that chose between the stove and the Mr. Cool, this does it for all your appliances to make sure that you're always able to balance anything. Because the truth is that all electric homes rarely use more than 30 amps with everything turned on at the most, like the 15-minute peak of the year. You just don't need really more than 30 or 40 amps in any house. So the lumen on the right-hand side, that's, you could think of that as more than enough for your house, but most people put in like a span panel. And if you have a 60 amp service in an apartment, span makes them for apartments, so you can electrify apartment complexes. And each of these, yeah, it's like a 60 amp panel that goes there, and it's a smart panel for the apartment, as opposed to 60 amps might not be enough to make an all electric apartment without a smart panel. Like you might want to have for the code purposes, like 80 amps of service to that apartment for code, not for actual use, but for code. So anyway, I just want to point out that smart panels can be one of the solutions if you don't do power efficiency in the appliances.
Sean, this
Yeah.
lumen thing is fascinating. I would love it if
Yeah.
you could just like hover on that for a second. What
Check
is it
out the lumen.
appropriate for a retrofit application, or is this more for
Yes.
new builds? How does it
These
work?
are these are definitely retrofit appropriate.
Okay.
So lumen, which is works as a sub panel. So you have your main panel, and let's say you have a 50 amp circuit or a 30 amp circuit that you're going to plug that lumen into. Okay, so it has that amount of electricity delivered to that panel, and then you can plug in, 150 amps of stuff into it. And you should never have all those things on at the same time. It's almost impossible to even do. It's thousands and thousands of homes demonstrated. Like it is, you just don't get really past 30 to 40 amps, no matter what, for your whole all electric home. So the lumen, yeah, you can plug 100, 150 amps of stuff into it. And
And you don't
that
mean
can be like your electrification solution for the whole house. And everything's going through like a 30 or 50 amp lumen sub panel, and you're golden.
so they're you're hardwiring your stuff into the lumen. It's not plug in like a you don't mean like an extension cord or
No, I mean
something.
hardwired, pardon me. I shouldn't say, yeah, plug, but the
Okay.
circuit breakers inside a lumen are normal circuit breakers, but they have an
Okay.
overlay of a computer on them that says, as long as none of these circuits are actually getting, hot and dangerous, then everything can stay on. And, as long as you're not going past the amount of power that this system can actually supply, 30 amps or 50 amps, then everything can stay on.
Does it modulate like does it turn things up and down to make
No,
sure?
it's usually an on-off thing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the code doesn't really allow for modulation as a strategy for safety. They don't trust the computer. They want something that will actually go snap. It got
Okay.
too warm, snap. So everything in here still has the heat-based circuit breakers, but there's a computer saying as long as you guys are not going past the 30 amps, and even if that computer fails, the 30 amp breaker that you have on the main panel does go snap if that computer
Right.
failed to let more than 30 amps of energy go through it. So there's multiple redundancies for safety, and it's, National Electrical Code approved as, a normal safe device.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Lumen is a great retrofit solution, but so is the bigger span panel. People use those in retrofits. Here are the smaller versions. So I showed you the NeoCharge earlier. Dryer Buddy, which is designed kind of for EVs and electric dryers to balance each other. Simple Switch, which is open to almost anything. Splitter switch, EV duty. A lot of them expect the EV to be the challenge. Thermolec, which is a one that does actually let you use up to 80 amps of capacity of your 100 amp panel for something like a crazy fast EV charger or your really big garage arc welder. Like a Thermolec can allow you, because it's most likely that your house is not even using 10 amps ever, like 10, 15 amps. So your Thermolec can let you use a whole other 80 amps just for some crazy ass load and have it be legal, safe. Yeah. So at the beginning, we're talking about how electrification in most of the country saves money. But in any state, sometimes people will be on the short end of the stick and have a slightly higher utility bill. And that can be true more and more so, just depending on how people behave or the balance between gas and electricity prices in that state. So one of the easy things to do is install solar. You know, that is the cheapest electricity available in our country is solar electricity. And I showed you how that's true at the utility scale, but it's also true at the home scale. If you can finance your solar array, you can usually get it paid off within 5 to 15 years of a 25-year warranty device. It's cheaper if you have access to capital. Well, over in Germany, renters have been like, I'm not waiting for my landlord. I'm going to put up this solar panel here on my balcony. And there are 4 million of these installed now in Germany. It's huge. And they just plug it into the 120-volt outlet on their balcony for them to have had like their electric barbecue or their boombox or whatever. They plug that solar panel in. That panel is now producing electricity only for their house. It does not discharge into the grid. You do not get credit from the grid for discharging into the grid because you don't put electricity into the grid. Instead, at your circuit breaker panel, it's got a little controller, and the controller says, solar panel, you're allowed to work as long as you're producing electricity that the house is consuming. Oh, you're producing too much electricity, inverter, you have to turn off. I'm not going to allow the solar panel to produce extra. So it's a regulator so that you're only producing electricity for your house and you don't have to get involved with the utility permission slip process, or for that matter, additional safety measures and new wiring and things. So Utah, the state of Utah, passed a law making this legal for the state. California is one of the first places I'm seeing it being actually deployed by a nonprofit led by 2 Germans, unsurprisingly. These 2 guys, or this one guy, pardon me, I don't know the other guy's face. And they're putting up 400 and 800 watt solar arrays so that they can produce just self-consumed electricity. Yep. So 120-volt plug-in inverter, brightsaver.org, if you want to check it out. They're structured as a nonprofit because they're not trying to make money off of this. They know that everyone's going to be in on this once they finally break it open. They're doing it out of the goodness of their nonprofit hearts, you know, as a public service to try to get this going in the United States. Now, I wanted to show you this as just a little bit of what it means to be rich. These folks have had all-electric mansions on water for quite a while now. This is the 120-foot-long Silent 120. And it can go 100 miles a day on that solar array up on the roof. It has a helicopter pad that you can see there. There's a heat pump that operates that hot tub down below. Comes with an electric submarine on one side and an electric jet ski that pops out on the other. It has, you know, seats 12 or something with the induction galley on the second floor of the 3 floors. 6 bedrooms, just fabulous. Silent, runs 100 miles a day across the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean. You're like, well, how fast is that? It's 1/3 as fast as if you had an a gas diesel thing that was just blowing you there. So it's because just making electricity from its roof operating the boat, moving. So 1/3 as fast going across the Atlantic as if you had a fossil fuel engine. But it's 3 times faster than going across the ocean on sails. Right? You know?
And Sean, this does come standard for all my clients in Michigan as part of the MyHertz program.
Absolutely. It's the Lake
So
Michigan variety.
that's
You know,
right.
the one that gets you all the way up to the UP in just a couple of days. And you can hang out and, you know, fish for perch, muskies and such. And that's my presentation. Just wanted to like let you know that this is how people are rolling at all scales of income. You know, people who are renting, people who are not renting. So I wanted to, oh, look at all the comments there. Fun. You got the LumenSmart panels. Thanks, Wayne. Dale, you put in the electric grill options. Excellent. Will, you point that out that Dale had a solar-powered all-electric grill out at the Passive House in Grand Rapids yesterday for us workers. It was delicious. Beautiful. Ginny, you know of a good contractor in AA. Email me. All right, Ginny. You see that Will's trying to hook you up? Okay, and Ginny, your question there about how current air source and ground source heat pumps cannot provide water that's hot enough for baseboard heaters, which is true with one exception that we found that I mentioned. But otherwise, I was recommending that you replace the baseboards themselves.
So
You
Sean,
like ductwork?
aren't there some carbon dioxide based water
CO2
heaters?
ones?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Wayne's referring to is that the refrigerant that's inside a heat pump can go to different temperatures of coldness. And CO2, it boils at negative 110 Fahrenheit, whereas most refrigerants that are fossil fuel based are boiling at negative 40 or negative 30 Fahrenheit. Boiling is this important thing in how it collects heat from the environment. But the problem is, Wayne, is that the CO2 heat pumps won't accept water back to themselves unless it's been chilled. And that's not commonly done. It's hard to do, really. But there is one company called Harvest that is doing it. So I'm going to stop share here and honor that question. But basically, they're used as water heaters for for water heating, like domestic water. But okay, so oh shoot, I just said its name. Harvest Thermal Heating. Okay. Harvest Thermal. So these folks, it's funny actually that there's a slide that I showed you where you can see one of the founders is Pierre. He's in the back of the room at that Berkeley Expo when people are listening to me call for a ban of gas in new construction. So he quit his job as a technical director at the NRDC to start this company, which was to figure out how to use CO2 heat pump water heaters, store the heat in essentially tanks of water, and like filter feed it back to the CO2 heat pump water heater at the right temperature so it continues to work efficiently. So it's an all-in-one system. There you go. There's Pierre. There's Jane. So if you'd like to use a CO2 heat pump water heater, this company here, that's the question though, would they work for baseboard heaters? I don't know. Like that'd be something to ask them. But certainly the water gets up to 150 degrees Fahrenheit, which is right at the lower edge of what baseboard heaters use, which is 150 to 160, 170. So I'm not positive that it would create the water temperature that you need for baseboard heaters. But it is the right temperature for fan coils, like for ducted systems. That works at 130 to 140 Fahrenheit, and that's what they're used to doing. And of course, it works for hydronic floors, which is very common in the Bay Areas, high-end hydronic floors. So that's Jane and Pierre. And Dale, you're pointing out, let's look at this. You said Mitsubishi has them on the commercial side. Yeah, high volumes of domestic hot water. Domestic means like the stuff you shower in or comes out of a sink. It's not for space heating. This is for non-potable space. This system is for potable water. It's for an apartment complex, basically, and other things where you'd have a lot of domestic hot water demands. So it can be used in central and hotels, multifamily spaces. They say radiant heating.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe they figured out how to do it, where they bring the water back cold enough.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they'll make up to 160-degree water, if I remember right. I attended a webinar on it a year ago or so.
Yeah.
I think it
Well,
was
and
160.
CO2, they
Yeah.
they can produce up to about 184 to 192 degrees with CO2, depending on how it's kind of geared inside with like what is the computer telling it to do and such. But yeah, it certainly could make the right amount of hot water. Harvest, I just know that the system that they have does only make 149 degree Fahrenheit water. That's it. So that's this system, which is for houses, and this one, which is sized for larger buildings. Um, anyway,
Yeah, and one thing about these CO2 units is that they're better for the environment because a lot of the refrigerants have very large heating factors compared to CO2. So
yeah,
that's
they're if the refrigerant gets leaked, it's just CO2
yeah,
versus a much nastier chemical.
that can be thousands of times worse than CO2. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's a good one if you can get it. However, if you leaked all the refrigerant from your HVAC system all at once, like you just stuck a screwdriver in it and blew it out, because your house has a gas leak built into it, the pressure regulator for a gas device has like a 1% leak that we're allowed to leak that out. Methane is such a powerful greenhouse gas polluter, and that is so much gas leaking out that it equals all of the nasty refrigerant chemical over a course of about 2 years. So electrifying your whole house to get rid of just that 1% leak it's the right thing to do for the environment, even if you had a problem with your refrigerant, because you have a problem with your methane leaking out of a pressure release valve on every gas meter that exists. There's a little disc that is sitting on a disc, and that's where the gas leaks out on purpose to maintain pressure at the right pressure.
Hmm.
So it's worth doing, just period. One leak versus another leak, it's worth electrifying. Let's see here. I can take it back to the slides. Anyone is like there we go.
Sean, I wanted to ask about
Yeah.
total panel size. So there was a lot of talk about keeping it to 100 amps. Do you see that there's anything like, are you sort of opposed to like upgrading to a
Oh
200
no,
amp panel?
I'm not opposed to it at all. Like, and
Okay.
it's code in California. The reason why you'd go up to say a 200 amp panel, people like there's always no reason to do it that you have to do it is my point, because getting a new electrical line delivered from the utility is usually 3,000 to 30,000. If it's underground, then it's 30,000. If it's a long driveway, it's 30,000. If it's right off
Right.
the street, then it might be just a few $1,000s to get a new line. But that cost also comes with usually a 2 to 6 month delay. And it
Mm,
starts getting into the situation of like, how do you, if your
right.
water heater breaks right now and all of a sudden that triggers a service upgrade and you can't get it in time, but it's your hot water heater and you're like, I want to shower tomorrow, ideally, maybe next day, but not like 2 months from now. These are strategies that try to bring forward to avoid delays, avoid significant cost increases. But people put in larger panels so they can put in a larger solar array. 100 amps can support a 4 kilowatt solar array. That's the most. If you go to 200 amps, then you can put an 8 kilowatt or 4 to 8 kilowatt array system on your panel. Lots of people want 4.5 to 6 kilowatt arrays, and it's just enough to trigger going
Right.
up to a 200 amp panel. Unless you do a clipping inverter, unless you do a meter collar. There's other strategies to put that much solar into your electrical system without triggering the service upgrade, the new wire from the street. That takes time and money. But that's one reason, is the 4 to 8 kilowatt array needs to usually go on a 200 amp panel. Other people will put in like a really fast EV charger, like a 40 amp or a 50 amp 240 volt EV charger on their 100 amp panel. And they could have done, the Thermalec with that 50 amp charger, or they could have done a NeoCharge 50 amp, circuit splitter, but instead they opted to do the service upgrade. And that's just happening so much in California, where electricians are making $8,000 a pop to put in service upgrades, that this has been an important issue of like, we don't have to slow down, we don't have to trigger extra cost increases, we don't have to put more pressure on the grid. We could control loads here. If you wanted to keep all houses at 30 amps, okay. That means like every once in a while, someone's air conditioner is going to shut off for 15 minutes. Just that's why, it's because going past the existing infrastructure seems to trigger all the counter arguments out there as to why we
Right.
shouldn't be electrifying so quickly. Oh, grid stress. Oh, it's going to cost too much. It's going to take too long. So, but if you have it planned out, if you're like, we got a few months, our appliances are showing up, we think it's going to be a lot easier if we have up to 200 amps of service, no money constraints, charge. It's easy to have. I have a
Yeah.
200 amp service. I just
Yeah.
didn't know that I could have gotten by with 100 amps. But at this point, I have my house and a secondary dwelling unit and a third and a fourth. I have three tiny houses that I'm supporting, and a machine shop and a barn. So now I'm like, all right, I'm glad I have
On
two.
200 amps.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's a webinar in and of itself. If that's not recorded, I want to do that one.
I can show you my little passive house straw bale tiny house. The one I'm
Yes,
in
I
right
want to
now
see
is like
that.
insulated with wool.
Wow.
Yeah, we're on the same page, by the way. We're all,
Yeah,
focusing on all the ways to try to make things better.
that's great.
I'm
Well,
super interested in your
yeah,
balcony solar, just the
yeah.
technical detail on that. You mentioned that there's a device that won't allow it to produce more power than the house is using. So there must be something in the circuit breaker panel that communicate
Yes,
with
exactly.
whatever
So in the
plugs in.
circuit breaker panel, there'll be a little box with current transformers, CTs. So there'll be little clamps on it to say how much electricity is being consumed by the house to make sure that there's no backflow. And that little CT and little box then communicates with a Wi-Fi over to the inverter, the microinverter that's on the back of these panels. And that communication tells the inverter to ramp it down or shut it off.
That is super slick. I wondered how that worked. I'd heard about this, and it's like, yeah, I kind of assumed it was standalone, that it was just, something you could plug into like a standalone system, but it's right into the house. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and there's millions of them installed where, renters on with balconies and patios and backyards and things are just trying to get, their bills lowered a little bit.
mhm.
Um, yeah. I mean, Germany, by the way, years ago banned new gas boilers, and German homes are usually just heated and domestic hot water, both with one boiler. And so this is all over Europe, by the way. Like they've already been doing these bans um, for new construction and retrofits and such on putting in new gas infrastructure when you're taking out your old gas infrastructure. Just have to electrify. So yeah, it makes sense for them too. Everyone wants to lower their bills once, if they can.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic about this. You know, it's the fact that it's just grown so much in Germany, and we have a law in Utah that requires the utilities and such to let it go on. And it's like, because it feels very, I think, very conservative, libertarian, sort of like, this is my power. Don't you try to stop me. If it's legal, I want to do it, that kind of thing. I want to harness that ornery energy. Just like, we deserve to be able to put PV on our homes. Don't get in the way.
Yeah, that's one thing about going electric. You can be energy independent because you're
Oh,
not
yeah.
dependent on the oil,
The
oil
whole other webinar is
corporation.
how we're doing off-grid homes now with not just solar and batteries, but with the EV coming in as the extra battery and the battery that you can go charge somewhere else and bring it back as your extra battery. So you can just truly have a house that's off-grid. There's wealthy people that have been advising on how to do this now, California coastal folks. And yeah, like have two
Me,
EVs. One's for
like
driving
me.
around, the other one you go taking it to town, charge it up, bring it back, charge a battery, and two-car household and a stationary battery and a solar array. And you can live in one of these gorgeous remote areas that would be like $30,000, $50,000 to deliver electricity to. Go for it. You just have to drive your car out, charge it up, bring back your 70 to 100 kilowatt hour battery full up, and then discharge it into your stationary battery or just use it as your secondary. Like that's already possible. And in some cases for these wealthy people, cost effective compared to the infrastructure to get to their very remote spots. I focus on affordable housing, but every once in a while I'll play around with some rich person who wants to do something cool. I am supposed to be going to another meeting, and I have loved this. I hope, Will, that you'll invite me back. I'll do it any old time on any old topic. If you just want to do bidirectional EVs or you want to talk about off-grid apartment complexes or like that's
Yeah.
I feel like that's my role is to try to teach stuff. I used to be a science teacher and I love it. So thanks, Ross. I'm happy to
Yeah,
help out.
you've been fantastic as always. Thanks, Sean. I think any of those topics, or honestly, you just walking through with like a 60-minute selfie show of your little villa, your
Oh, what
little
fun.
condo association would be awesome. So
Yeah. There's
thanks a million.
experimental water heaters. There's fun little, I'll show you
Yeah,
all the good stuff.
great.
Um, all right. Take care, y'all. Have a good day.
Take care.
Thank
Thanks
you.
Bye
everybody
now.
for coming.